Cheers, love! The cavalry's here!
Blizzcon, yay! Okay, side note before we begin. I haven't uploaded in a good long while, but it's not from disinterest from WoW. Actually, I've been writing maybe a dozen scripts now. I get in this loop where I'll write it, I'll record the audio, I'll edit it, and while I'm editing, I kind of realize it's just me whining and being negative. And it's not constructive, and it's not fun. So whatever. I mean, I get the venting out of my system by recording, but I'm not adding to the conversation any. Now, that changes today because last week we had BlizzCon and we got to talk about all kinds of positive stuff about the future. Maybe mostly. It's like ups and downs. But BlizzCon's always a fun time for us as fans. And, if you like embarrassing cringe and wasting your time, this was maybe the best BlizzCon opening ceremony ever. Absolute Glizzriz, Ohio. I've had some problems with Overwatch, and Diablo 4 didn't really click with me. I don't hold it against those games. The presentations just weren't for me, so I'm not going to really critique how those announcements went. I'm not sure. They announced Cataclysm Classic. I don't know why. I feel like the point of Classic was there's a whole version of the map that people miss. They're nostalgic of. They have memories of it, and you can't see it. So with Classic, look, we undid Cataclysm. I feel like Cataclysm Classic is strange because in a way we can just go there right now. I know the level scaling is off, but if you want to see those zones and those stories, nothing's stopping you. So I don't know if that was the best announcement. Also, I mean, I'm not a huge Cataclysm fan. I didn't think those stories were the best. I'm also not a big Classic fan. I would rather spend time on current content. But that's only because I only have so much time in the day. And I know some people really don't like retail. So I get it, but it's not for me. I don't know. They did do something I never thought they would do. And that is get me interested in Classic. Specifically, they added the hardcore mode. And it's like experimental and new and different. Like that's kind of clever. So doing the Season of Discovery, I think that's maybe, I want to say unexpected. Not because it's a bad idea or it's even strange. Like a lot of YouTubers I saw, everybody seemed to assume that that's what the announcement would be. I just didn't think they had it in them to touch the formula any. Season of Discovery, I mean, you saw the presentation. I'm sure you know all the details. You might know more about it than me right now. But it just kind of seems like they're having fun with it and they're trying to make it an experience worth experiencing, not just a product worth selling. The fact that they're not putting too much stuff on the test server ahead of time so that people can data mine it. It's like everyone's going to log in and be equally clueless and equally fascinated with every little change along the way. I don't know how much changes they're really going to make. People are really focusing on the new abilities that let, warlocks tank or mages heal or whatever. But I feel like they're doing more stuff. Like they're going to be tweaking some endgame dungeons and maybe even adding new content later. And I like that it's going to be a slow rollout. The max level is 25 and they're going to add more with time. But I feel like not only does that keep everybody paced together, it also gives them time to observe and see what is and isn't working and hopefully build off of what is fun. So honestly, I give a lot of props to the Classic team. I didn't think I would care, even when I hear hypotheticals about what Classic Plus would look like. But after the presentation, I was kind of sold. I might actually dip my toes in there. Now, what about retail? I know I said I don't want to be negative. I don't think I can be wholly positive, though. So I'm going to do that obnoxious sandwich thing where I alternate good and bad points. I know you've heard all the news already. Again, if you guys didn't watch the presentation, but then you're watching a YouTube channel talking about it. I don't know why you'd pick this one first, but they did announce the next 3 Warcraft expansions, specifically because it's one big story arc. The World Soul Saga, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm mixed on it. The fact that they promised this would resolve by 2030, in a way, it's a good thing because they're communicating that they actually have a plan, and they're not going to just completely jump ship halfway through an expansion like we've felt in the past. I know I've complained about Shadowlands, I think, in every single video I upload, but man, you can just tell every single patch they were changing direction. So this is sort of them communicating, we're not going to do that again. And I like that. But also, it kind of means we're not going to have any surprises at BlizzCon until 2031. Am I wrong there? Chris Metzen came out. I feel like people are really positive about Chris Metzen, and I don't know why. Like, the people that love Chris Metzen coming back, they seem to phrase it the same way that, like, a Star Wars fans ask for George Lucas to come back. But it's like, didn't you guys hate all the prequels and everything George Lucas touched? Like, I thought people were happy to get fresh, hands on the property. The end result was bad. It wasn't what they wanted. But does going back to the thing that you were complaining about actually an improvement? Or should we just maybe get different new hands on it? If you watch the presentation, it was 2 hours long, and I think Chris Metzen came out for 15 minutes of it, and those 15 minutes were the only part where it felt like a human being was talking to you about the property right. Everyone else was just so awkward and stilted, and I don't mean to hold that against them, but I feel like they're choosing people based on how important they are in the company to talk about the game they work on. They really have to pick people that are charismatic enough to stand on stage. Am I wrong? Let's look at that World Soul Saga. So I think it's neat to have a big story. I'm also not super sold on it, mostly because I'm not a big fan of applying the Avengers scale MCU cosmic stuff. When I play World of Warcraft, what I really want is the world. I want to explore woods and find a spooky witch and then solve the witch problem. And then I want my friend to tell me about his own adventure that was on the other side of the planet. To me, that's what MMOs are special about. So, so we're looking at the first expansion, The War Within. War Within, we're going to go underground. We're going to, I guess, uncover the machinations behind the evils that the world are facing, and they're going to introduce the next big villain. Then with Midnight, is that what it's called? Just Midnight? Okay. With Midnight, we're going to face the darkness, and we're going to be challenged by a cosmic scale of what light and dark really is. And then with The Last Titan, we're going to finally uncover the truths of creation as we meet the gods and face and seize our own destiny with our own hands. So yeah, I'm gonna label this a bad point. I don't like any of these. With The War Within, that's going to be the most immediate, and that's, to be truthful, the only one we have real information on. Metzen joked about kind of spoiling the whole thing, but in a realistic sense, there's still a lot of room to explore these other chapters in ways that we haven't foreseen yet. They did confirm that they're going to be going to the old world and not adding new continents. Some people are interpreting it one way or the other. I don't think it means literally reusing that map. I think they're going to be redoing those maps. A lot of the topology will probably be the same, but I think they're going to be adding basically, an entire continent's worth of new content on Northrend, or at least part of Northrend. That's down the road, though. Let's just focus on War Within for now. Oh, you know what? Good point. I'm excited to know that these expansions are using the old world. I just to make that clear, I do kind of prefer that. We don't always need a new continent. I hope that it's handled gracefully, but I do think that's a good choice. Okay, bad point. The new allied race is dwarves. I've seen people ask for Earthen to be playable before. I know people are maybe a little mixed on the allied races, but I think it's overall positive. I'm not opposed to playable Earthen, but it's all we're getting. I think it's strange that the selling point, like normally with an expansion, you get excited about the new class or the new race. And I know there's a couple exceptions to that, but really it's kind of like, what's the big feature? So when they show new allied race and it's just a dwarf, and then also you can play dwarf on horde mode now, it's sort of just, it feels lacking. Some of the previews showed like interesting new hairstyles and gems and stuff that make them look more than just a dwarf, but I don't think that stuff's aesthetically pleasing. I want to see maybe some creative transmogs. I want to see maybe some creative racials. They haven't apparently decided on the racials yet. But I'm not opposed to them being there. But it feels like a very small feature to put in the trailer almost. A good point. Warbands. Warbands are a good idea. It's not super clear what warbands even are. I know it means that like you opt certain characters in and you share rep with those characters, but I don't know what the limits on that are. Like, is it only 5 or 4? I know that there's a new login screen where it's like all your characters are sitting on the campsite, and they pointed out how for now that's going to be the login screen, but maybe even maybe in the future they'll even show like alternate backgrounds. So you might be able to unlock a special like Torn themed background, or maybe it'll like vary by the zone. But for now, this is all we're getting. Yeah, and I think it's a good login screen. It's cool for people that like their characters to kind of connect to each other. As a role player, I usually write my characters very isolated. Like none of them are siblings. Most of the time, like I can't imagine them knowing each other. Like even in passing, I don't think my rogue is going to bump into my evoker. But for some people, they kind of do. They sort of want a family. They sort of want a sense that they're all main characters sharing the stage. And so this is a really cool way to really lean into that and share those accomplishments, because you did do the rep grind. Now your other characters that know that guy get the benefit of it. I don't really have a complaint with that. I think it's good. Let's talk about... Actually, this is another good point. I really like the hero talents. I don't know what these will really be. Again, we've only gotten previews that were very safe for a first-time announcement. But functionally, hero talents kind of sound like talent choices that combine class fantasy without locking you into a spec. And since it kind of has this hybrid approach where each hero talent sub-spec, I guess, is a middle ground between two different specs, this maybe makes more sense for some classes than others. But like for the mage, of course, you get Frostfire as an option. And I know some people that just kind of think that's cool, and they like the elemental forces, and leaning into that more and finding talents that buff those kinds of abilities more could give you a lot more personality to your mage. And I really like that. I hope that it feels good. My fear is that this will be the same as Shadowlands, except it'll be easier to swap around. But I have a feeling that maybe Frostfire is really good at AoE, and so for this next boss, you have to pick the single target version, and maybe it's not the playstyle you want, but it means completely different talents and a completely different rotation. we'll see how it really balances out. I think that they've been doing a better job of listening to feedback and noting this kind of data. I mean, Dragonflight, for the most part, every time there's balance patches coming out, I haven't been confused by the decisions they're making. Not everything's perfect, but for the most part, I feel like everyone that I know is happy with their spec right now, which is very rare. And I don't know that hero talents are going to get in the way of that or support that. But thematically, it's cool. I'm looking at these Death Knight ones, and it's like, I want to roll 3 Death Knights. These are all so neat. If they actually give you that sense of identity, they're all super cool. I look at the Demon Hunter ones, and those are just made up words. I don't know what that means. How about a bad point? Is this it for the features? Like, is that like they announced 3 expansions, and then somehow it almost feels like we have less content than normally in one expansion. It's like they're kind of safe about it. I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of times when they add new features, people don't even like the new feature. Again, with the Covenant system in Shadowlands, people would be happier if that system was just not there. So maybe instead of adding a Covenant system, they just opted not to. But this is the result, is we kind of just have, like some hero choices and a new dwarf model. So we'll see. A good point. Delves as a new feature. Now, I did just say there's not enough new features. I'm not sure I want to count Delves as a new feature as much as a slight evolution of Torghast and Island Expeditions, and even those like Niflheim runs that weren't really combat focused. It feels like they're taking good ideas that they've already tested and then expanding on it. This is what I want them to do as Warcraft devs specifically. I want the MMO components to be more evergreen content, more stuff that feels like you're doing things more than just for the reward. I want it to be a cute little side quest, and then it also rewards you. I thought Torghast was very fun, but also I wasn't raiding competitively, so I didn't have the goal in mind. When I just played Torghast casually, it was really good. The way that they forced you to grind so much of it, I completely understand why it got repetitive and unfun. A bad point. So we're getting 8 dungeons and 4 zones. At least at launch. I mean, I'm sure they can add more zones. But at that price point, it just seems like they're asking a little bit much. It's interesting too, because this time you get the player boost for the base expansion. So, like, I think according to this shop, they still sell those for $60, right? I don't think that's an accurate value of the boost, but they're technically throwing in a bonus that's kind of worthwhile. And it's like, well, that's nice. Not everyone needs it, but at least they're doing something. I think that's kind of cool. But also, the collector's edition's $90, and seeing them basically showcase very little and offer some like odd bonuses, like I think this toy looks a little silly, and say, oh yeah, it's worth $90 in digital goods. I know inflation and costs and everything and blah blah blah, but this is a monthly subscription game, and so when I look at what I spend on Warcraft in a year, even though I do buy a little bit of a cosmetic stuff, like I've bought mounts before, I buy the expansions as they come out, and I stay subscribed even when I'm not playing the game as much. I don't unsubscribe very quickly. I feel like I'm giving them enough money. So these, the $90 edition, that really rubbed me the wrong way. It's a personal choice, of course, but that is my stance. A good point. There's a lot of unsung small details. Drakthir and druids are going to get the dragon riding treatment. pretty much all mounts are going to be getting the dragon riding. It's just going to be like a free liberating thing again. There's been some interviews with devs where they show a lot of polish, a lot of little details here and there. Like they made it really clear this isn't maintenance mode. Even though the big selling points, the stuff you put in the back of the box, seem like it's missing, I think the actual soul is still there. If you haven't gone through, like, look at Wowhead and everything that they've actually uncovered, I'm looking forward to War Within. It's a bunch of little details, but even though we're this early in, it's like, oh, I can't wait for that. Oh, I can't wait for that. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, I think I saved best for last. This is a bad point, but one of the biggest and most exciting parts about an expansion announcement is when they show us the new cinematic. Even people that don't play Blizzard games point out how great Blizzard cinematics are. The VFX team, I'm not sure exactly how they handle this or who they outsource it to or what. Man, they're always so good. They're just good. And I thought, okay, let's talk about Dragonflight real quick. The Dragonflight cinematic was interesting because it had this new character. You know, it sort of opened, and here's this stone statue man. And he stands there as a statue, and then he becomes alive again. And it's like, well, what's his deal? What's his story? What's going on? And he's trying to climb to the top of the thing. It's like, well, what's going on? And he gets up there, and like all his friends are dead. And it's like, okay, but what's going on? And then you had to do the thing or something, and it's perilous. It's like, okay, but what's going on? And then he fell, but then the dragon saved him. And it's like, okay. And all the dragons are back, and it's colorful, and it's like, it's the Dragon Isles. And does he have a name? I know he does, but I mean, you walk through this very interesting and high quality animation. But I feel like they didn't tell much of a story. And this is what we're like 9 expansions into a game. Like, I feel like everyone knows these characters. Everyone knows stories. There's so much to work with. Even in telling a new story, you should have some clue of what we're going to be doing. And there's no hint at all what that expansion was even going to be about. Besides that dragons would be present, which also is not a new thing. War Within, visually great, but it's 5 minutes of Thrall and Anduin kind of just talking, and they're doing a better job of setting up what the narrative will be, but I don't want to hear from either Anduin or Thrall right now, especially because one of the things that I want from Warcraft is the war part. And Thrall kind of represents the Horde, and Anduin kind of represents the Alliance. And they're both people that have advocated for peace in the past. And having them have a heart-to-heart, like, if this was in a book, I would love that chapter. If this was a moment in the game that came up organically, I think that'd be a really memorable scene. But this, as your sizzle reel to get you excited about the expansion, I don't know why they bothered. This is the worst thing ever. I showed it to a friend, and he nervously skimmed through just to notice that every part of the thing just seemed to be Thrall or Anduin talking. And at the end, there's a big sword there. And he said, oh, cool, we're going to, what's the sword there for? And I said, oh, well, that's from a few expansions ago. We already know it. And I sent him that Legion cinematic. And he was like, oh, that was cooler than the trailer. I don't know what this story is going to be. Because if the trailer's setting anything, it's giving me these very bad Battle for Azeroth vibes. I got really tired of the cinematics that they kept releasing with each patch, because it was almost always just, I'm important. I'm expositing things. That we're going to do a thing if you download the patch next week. And yes, a thing. And I didn't like any of those. I did not like how they handled Sylvanas in those. This was also peak bad Sylvanas writing. I didn't like Zappy Boy. Go upvote yourself on Reddit. I don't care. I'm getting those BFA flashbacks that I don't want to see right now. So, as bad as all that was, it's like, boy, I don't know what's going on. And then they showed the other trailer where it's like the gameplay feature trailer, and the zones are so pretty, and the monsters are so cool looking. And it's like, okay, I'm on board. The game part still looks like the game. But man, it was such an underwhelming trailer. I can't believe they used that for their announcement. But that's me. These are very subjective feelings. I think because this is an entertainment product, measuring subjectivity is important. But it's not the end-all be-all because I'm only one pigeon. I'm sure there's a flock of you guys out there that disagreed with every single point I made. But these are what I saw. This was a BlizzCon. There was lots of cringe. There was lots of fun news. As always, I think the highlight was just community night and seeing all the talented cosplayers and artists that maybe Blizzard could pay more respect to, but their work was respected by the fans at least. And that's that. I don't know. If we look at the tally board here, I don't know what any of this means. Well, see you next time, guys.